Well, good morning, everybody. Sorry, Eddie couldn't make it. So as mentioned, my name is Harshul. I run the cyber advisory for DarkMatter. And by the way, great panel, so I really appreciate that. Great points. Uh, you know, the GCC threats and countermeasures, and along the day we've been talking a lot about threats, and I'm going to focus a little bit about countermeasures, but also I want to continue some of the key points that was brought in the panel before that was very interesting and very practical. So I've been in this industry for 20 plus years, and we talked about AISEC. So back in 1998, when the first AISEC was developed, I was part of the telcos GTE back in US. So that's when the PDD 63, the Presidential Directive 63 came to develop the AISECs in US. And I was with the telcos, I was for years with the telcos, GTE, which is now Verizon. So it was the good old, we call it Baby Bells, Bell Atlantic GTE. And I will share some of the practical insights with regards to AISECs. But here is, and I'd like to make this interactive because I like to talk to the audience. So AISECs and information sharing, we talked a lot about that, and thanks to the panel. But it has been, what, 20 years? We almost in 2018. And AISEC started in 1998. 20 years of information sharing concept has been introduced. And we're still talking about, should we share it? Are we anonymous? Would we get into trouble? What does this tell us? What does this fundamentally tell us? If we are talking about these issues 20 years after the concept was introduced to the world, what does this tell us? We're not clear. And why are we not clear? Anybody? They don't understand. Great. Who is they? Correct? See, this is fun. This is fun. So, great answers. But here is what I'm going to play devil's advocate, and you'll enjoy this. Basically, guys, we're talking about regulations, laws, and when I hear the panel, we talk about UBF, UAE regulations, and then we talk about global AISECs in the same sentence. We struggle to put a legal framework in a 50-people organization. We struggle to put a framework in a country. And now we're talking across the world in terms of sharing. We talked about anonymity, but we didn't talk about is a simple word called immunity. Something called immunity. If I share, I cannot be prosecuted. If I share, you cannot subpoena my data. That's the piece that's missing. And forget about that piece being missing in one country. How can you get that across the globe? So the reason I'm bringing that up is because that's the continuation of the panel, and I want to talk about the countermeasures more, is because that's the piece that needs to be solved. And if I may say, in my all honesty, because I'm a very practical guy, that's the piece will never be solved 100%. We cannot solve it 100%. Forget cyber for a second. We are a young industry. We are 20, 30, 40 years old. Talk about law enforcement. Talk about law enforcement and go to Dubai police today and say, make a blanket statement. Can you share this data with Interpol? They'll be confused. Because as the boundaries gets confused, it's the sharing of information, cyber or non-cyber, across the country boundaries is always going to be tricky. It always will be extremely complicated. I'll give you one other example. Think about all the breaches. So I came from Salesforce. I worked in the threat intel industry in US for 20 plus years, Baby Bells, AISECs, so on and so forth. But you think about all the last 5, 6 breaches. Yahoo, Adobe, name it. What is the single common thread between all these breaches? Forget the complexity of the attacks, forget all of that. What's the single common thread? Human, but still, more. The company publicly will always say, we were breached 6 months back and we just realized it. Or we knew that we have been attacked, but it took us 6 months to figure out that our customer data has been breached, right? So now what happens if I am that company, I share with the AISECs on day 1, but I tell my people after 6 months? Legally, it's a crime. It's a legal crime. I'm just giving you practical reasons why people are scared of sharing. You see what I'm saying? If I share with an FS AISEC, or I was part of the communication AISEC on day one, that, hey, this is the problem, inherently I could be subpoenaed because I knew that there is a remote probability that I had lost my customer data. Then I can't go after 6 months and tell my customers that it took me 6 months to figure it out, because then it exposes me completely. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the real reasons why we have issues sharing. These are the real reasons. I'm just, and one of the other things that I'd like to kind of combine few concepts, so bear with me, is we talked about voluntary thing. So let's just amuse ourselves. In the last 12 months, what's the most successful volunteer business model that we have seen? In the last 12 months, come on guys, in the last 12 months, there's been an amazingly successful volunteer model that's right in front of us. Bitcoins. Miners are volunteers, right? Why are miners volunteers? There's two reasons. They're anonymous. Bitcoin promises anonymity. But second, there's also financial benefit, right? I get a piece of Bitcoin. So again, I play devil's advocate. So should we tell all the banks, all the telcos that if you share, they will get a piece of the pie from other companies' revenue? Will that work? I don't know. I'm just throwing concepts out, but I'm just sharing some practical ideas with you. So back to my presentation, sorry, but I like to continue and glue the other themes along. And again, this is the high-level threat landscape in the UAE and the GCC, and I'm not going to go into too much of this because I want to talk more about countermeasures. But again, we have seen a lot of things around NSA exploits being used against Swift. We saw some buildings up on CIL licks. We saw things around Greenbug and Muddy Waters. And these are all happening. It happened in the other GCC countries. It happened in UAE. And there are blogs out there. There is limited amount of sharings out there. So back to the information sharing. But, and the key is there are a lot of other things that we can't share here. It's confidential. You guys know what's happening in the world. But again, this is kind of the tip of the iceberg. What we see here is what's happening, and it will continue to happen. That's a guarantee. It'll continue to happen because the cyber world has a lot of incentives for this kind of things to happen for various reasons. National interest, financial interest, espionage, cyber terrorism, you name it, right? But what is the state of collaboration? Because I'm talking about the countermeasures. There is open source intelligence. There's a lot of stuff. But when I talk to a lot of people, and over the last 20 years, not only just here, but in US, I worked with a lot of regulators. I was the head of regulations for cybersecurity with Salesforce, Chinese, Hong Kong, Australian, Europeans, and a lot of companies. The key is when the information comes, it may not be relevant. It trickles in from an organization standpoint or from a country standpoint. And then when they share the alerts, the point is it's not just the alerts. It's the indicators of compromise. What are you seeing that I can act upon today? So let's make it practical. Here we talked about banks. Let's talk about ports. If Jebel Ali port sees something, they have to say something to Abu Dhabi port or Dubai port to say, hey, this is what we're seeing. And this is not one-off. Looks like this is a nation-sponsored attack. Just an example, right? So then that's just not enough. They have to share the IOCs, or we call it tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTLs. And then are they actionable? Are they in the right format? Can I quickly ingest it and make my SIEM or firewall more intelligent? So this is kind of the state of collaboration, which is we collaborate, and I want to say globally, this is not a UAE statement, this is not a GCC statement. The global success of collaboration from an information sharing standpoint, I want to say it's, in a success standpoint, I'll give it 20 to 25%. But the global success of ingestion and actionable collaboration is under 10%. Because if I tell you after 3 months that, hey, you know what, by the way, I saw something, that's not good. And what did you see? And what did you do? And by the way, one of the panelists talked about, help, and then this is what I did, and this is what you guys should do. So one is help. I'm seeing something from this part of the world. The second is, guys, this is what I saw, this is what I did, and by the way, this is what you guys should do too, by the way, to save the time from you doing the research on how to counterattack this particular threat. So our state of collaboration is in weak at best globally because of all these reasons. And one of the questions was spot on in terms of resources. We talked about resources. So if we are struggling with our own resources, how can we have something to put out to the world with regards to actionable IOCs and TTLs? That's what I'm talking about, right? So again, real collaboration. And again, we have technologies out there with regards to big data, siphoning through data, and again, we don't have to go far. Forget security for a second. If you go to Google, your Google Gmail account, and send an email to the friend saying, I'm going to go to Sri Lanka, right? Within 10 seconds, you'll get a whole bunch of hotels of Sri Lanka next to that. We have amazing big data platforms. Forget the vendors. We have that capability. The technology is there. The key is, when we talk about a national intelligence center, whether it's UAE or wherever, how do we slice and dice the AISECs? We have AISEC here, enterprises at the end, government partners, your RTAs, your ADVIAs, your polices. And then on this side, you have classified partners, your government agencies. This model is the most critical model, how you slice and dice. And behind all of this, it's a time factor. So I'm a big fan of KPIs. And my team and a lot of even my family members hate me for that, because in my world there is no brownie point for efforts. So you do something, and my question is, so what? So give me black and white. If we have a successful AISEC, what does that mean? Is my KPI to respond, has that gone down 20%? Where are the KPIs in this? So we talk about concepts, AISECs, data sharing, but what does that mean? Does that mean, how are we measuring the KPIs across boundaries? That's one critical piece that's missing. And again, the key is when you have a national intelligence center, and I worked in a lot of countries, I worked in the US for 20 plus years. One of the things I enjoy working in UAE is because this country, at least you can put your arms around the critical infrastructure. I can sit and say, these are the key things I want to protect. And then at least have an effort to say, how can we share data, the process behind anonymity, the process behind regulation, so on and so forth. Talk about regulations. Open Dubai data law. Fantastic regulation. It'll take 100 years for US to pass that on a good day, right? That's the regulation that becomes the backbone of something like this, which is, what is the law? What is shared with the telco ISACs, FS ISACs, so on and so forth? Then how does it trickle to the enterprises? How does it trickle to the international community? We talked about we are okay receiving, but we are not that okay sharing. How does that all become pretty standardized? This is the framework that talks about that. And then on the left-hand side is the classified partners, your intelligence agencies, so on and so forth. And then how can they standardize data and then share it back to the communities? Because at the end of the day, on this side is your national security. On this side is your GDP, and both are interconnected. So this is kind of going one step down, and I'm not going to go through every box here because I'm running out of time anyways, but this is kind of the global CTIs, the infrastructures, the attack monitoring, and these are some of the boxes that we look at DarkMatter in terms of where are we focusing. And some of the key things that I'm focusing lately is right here, somewhere around predict government, telco, payment systems, because telcos have a lot of data. How can we use this data to disseminate across all the boxes? And then we talked about in terms of research, in terms of how we do the forensics. So again, there are centers of forensics around detection and response, and that can be used across communities or across other organizations that can help them react quickly. Because I'm sure not everybody has top-of-the-line IR forensics lab. So if there are 2 or 3 labs in the country, or 2 or 3 labs by sectors, telco, oil and gas, FS, you name it, how can it trickle quickly back and forth from this box back to this bigger cloud? And this is where we look at the concept in terms of, guys, this is the need of the hour. This is what we can create from a technology standpoint. These are all the regulatory requirements. These are all the practical reasons why people and all of us will fail together. And this should be the blueprint. So again, the goals is region specific, and I'm big into this. So I think I like the and they haven't paid me for that. The HSBC ads when I come to the airport: think locally, globally, act locally. It's extremely important because, yeah, it's great to get global feeds, but regionally, what's happening in GCC, in UAE, by sector, and how do we take actionable information and disseminate that? That's extremely important. So what's happening with Shell or BP in Texas is not that relevant to ADNOC here, but what's happening to Aramco is relevant. So to me, it's a region-specific intel, which will make us more successful from a KPI standpoint. And see, at the end of the day, last 30 seconds, I'll have a couple of questions. These are the facts. We will, UAE, GCC, we will face security threats this year, next year, and beyond. And again, the collaboration is important, but public policy, creation of intelligence centers and AISECs, and one of the things that I have not mentioned here is the KPIs, public-private partnerships and KPIs. And an ongoing debate on the degrees, there's a gray, the shades of gray between voluntary and mandatory. And how do we draw a right line? How do we see that this is working? The practical examples that the panelists gave before me and I gave, how can we make sure that we can address them? And how can we make sure that the security community are more comfortable in this framework? That's kind of the question in front of us. And the beauty is as we go, as UAE launches into the next wave of digitization, smart cities, this is the right time to think about it. Because once UAE grows to 30, 40, 50 million people, it'll be too late. This is the right time. We're thinking the right issues. We have the right organizations at the table. We're asking the right tough questions. There are other central banks of other countries with similar, what I call risk appetite, bring the right questions. We just have to talk about it. And again, yes, we can follow the laws. One of the things that I talk a lot about is standards. So I'm part of the global ISO standard. And I publicly say, a lot of times I'm disappointed with the global standards. You guys know the reason why? Are you guys, anybody happy with, anybody extremely thrilled with any ISO standard? You know what's the reason? Anybody knows why are we disappointed with the security standards coming out of this? Yes? Mm-hmm. Great. One size fits all. What else? They don't say how. It's all very idealistic. What else? No recommendation, very high level. No accountability. That's great. I would love to see one of the ISO editors go to jail for a breach. Love it. Love it. I would sign. I would go to jail if that's, seriously, I love it. So, but what else? There's one other key piece missing. Pardon? It's still beyond security. It gives you a false sense of security. But there's one other thing. It's dynamic, it's always moving. It becomes a checkbox. But 90 plus, and I'm being very generous. I want to say 98 plus, but I want to say 90 plus. You don't record this, okay? 95 plus people of these ISO standards have never worked a day in the field. They're academic people. They don't know the challenges that we face. They say, you know what, the breach notification should be 24 hours. Do you have any idea for a retailer like Amazon with 100 million customers, what will it take to inform each and every one of them within 24 hours of a breach? No, they have never worked a day in the field. And that needs to be changed. So regulators, standard bodies, right now, the ratio of people giving us their expert opinion has never worked in the field. If we change that, I would see this slowly shifting towards more practical outcome. All right, guys, thank you so much. Appreciate it.